Sure. Hi, welcome everybody. Blah, 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 blah. My name is Chris. Imagine, provide services in Boulder and Brookfield counties. So this is Bob Ottinger, and Brenda Lee from Reality Garage. They actually run a virtual reality lounge just nearby in Boulder over on Pearl Street. So if you're local, feel free to check them out. Additionally, we're here with Dr. Ted Selker, represented by the University of Maryland, and his credentials do go on. I'm going to let him actually start us off and tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us about the history of VR.
Hi, I've been thinking about tools and making tools all my life. I'm an inventor. I spend a lot of my time building the ThinkPad and at IBM. And what was really fun about making the ThinkPad is just how often we were able to include things that help people with disabilities in the design and actually justify them for that reason. I went on to be a professor at MIT, thinking about how to include new technologies, which is what I'm always thinking about. Today, I'm going to talk about the history of virtual and augmented reality. I spent the last 3 years helping Magic Leap make their augmented reality thing. But basically, every tool that we make is something that makes us able to do something we couldn't do without it. And so we're all augmented by the things that we wear and use. And basically, people have been trying to bridge fantasy and reality for millennia. And I'm going to go a little bit into how that brings us to augmented reality and virtual reality, and just very briefly. We'll get on to the specific reasons that we are here also. And what's surprising to me is that the technology can be extremely disruptive, and something that you hold in your hand and you have access to everything in the world is now causing about 1/10 of the accidents. So texting while driving is a big problem. So as we design these new technologies, we have to be very aware of what does it mean to help people be engaged in the world and the people around them as much as whatever it's supposed to do to support us. I was just in the what do you call it? The show where people are showing their stuff, and there was some really lovely what I would call augmented reality tools that allow you to see what it's going to be like when you go to where you're going, remind you when you're there, get you off the bus, get you doing what you need to do. This is not pie in the sky. This is now real products that people can actually use. Very exciting. And so as we make these things, in some sense, every tool is a cognitive support. I don't know. There's some pictures of things I've built. There's me trying to measure blood oxygen on Mount Everest. It's kind of harder than other places. But we're now at a place where there are hundreds of people that have written papers, scientific papers, about using VR technology in the treatment of anxiety and psychiatric disorders. I mean, it's really frustrating to me that that is about as close as it gets to people writing papers about actual helping people with disabilities. And yet, we do use these technologies for that. What was surprising to me also is that almost all the successes in the tools that people have made so far are for things like distracting people when they're having pain, or basically slowly getting rid of some phobia by selectively giving them a little bit more at a time. Those were all of those successes that were actually statistically significant in the hundreds of articles that I kind of reviewed about this. And the kind of interesting thing is that this exposure therapy, when you ask a person, hey, do you want a person to help you go through exposure therapy, 27% of people are kind of queasy. When you ask them, will you do it with VR without a person, only 3%. So people, surprisingly, are up for this, up for using technology to take them through some training to have them overcome some cognitive problem. And I was also surprised that in all of the papers that I read, that everything was administered by a therapist. They were not self-administer scenarios. So that doesn't mean that that isn't stuff that's done. I'm just saying what I found in the literature. So anxiety management training is, you know, people have been talking about it forever, you know, 1971, and now, you know, we're going to apply it to these new technologies that we have today. And anxiety, I guess, is, you know, maybe one thinks, okay, that is, where does that stand in cognitive disabilities? Well, you know, there's a lot of cognitive disabilities where anxiety is the main, is a big component. Certainly, my son's autism problems, a lot of them stem from emotional and anxiety problems. Here we have people trying to use these technologies. But where does VR and AR come from? So this little animation over there is from something we found in the ground from 5,000 years ago. So somebody made a pot with little slats in it and drew some pictures of a deer, and you spin this pot and you saw this movie. And that was found in Iran. About 100 BC, a guy in China likes to, he kind of promulgated things like that also. It's not new that people have been trying to make these images that are fabricated, certainly even the fairy tales, the crystal ball of the first century is really a story of this fabricated world that is created outside of your head. You know, Vannevar Bush in 1945 has all these images of people having cameras on their head and people getting imagery to their eyes. The technology didn't exist yet. However, the first patent is around that time. So in 1945, somebody did patent putting CRTs on the eyes. You know, what we find is the first stories about it. This Pygmalion spectacles was the first story that's really kind of a piece of literature. In 1935, this guy wrote this story about, it's a love story, it's, you know, with fantasy, but really this idea that, you know, you put on these glasses and you get to go be with this woman and all of that stuff. So that stuff started quite early. Films have had it for a while, and if you think about Metropolis or The Wizard of Oz, both of these things have a person being augmented. In The Wizard of Oz, it's very explicit that he feels inadequate to be what he wants to be, and he uses this technology, this to project somebody that he wants other people to think he is. And I think that is a pervasive goal of the fantasy that people have, that they want to be a little bit better presentable, more presentable than they are. And that's one thing you can use technologies for. But augmented network has changed everything. I mean, we can't imagine that Apple 10 years ago got sued their ass off because they didn't have any disability support. Now it is, you know, that I know that the American Federation of the Blind, you know, think it's the very best disability support on the planet. Eyes for You, using you know, your camera and somebody else is looking through it, is now a product. People use it to cross streets, to find bathrooms, to do all sorts of things that they would have had to have a surrogate with them to do 5 years ago. In French cities, most of the establishments have radio signals that can talk to a person, and they are actually able to, with their receivers, know they're outside of a store, they're at a stoplight, they're at a stop sign, what the state of it is, all with RF. This is amazing. So this is really embellishing the you know, Paris and all these other cities with, I say it's actually augmented reality. But we use it for everything. We drive turn by turn. Our telephones know where we are, and and you can show us where we are. All of our apps are location aware, and we act as though it's normal for the world to be augmented by our technology. Shopping in every store that I'm in any store I want to be in today. Learning, Google, Siri, Alexa, everything about anything I want, anywhere, in any modality that I want to communicate. I mean, we're really living in an incredible place now, and I think that we can take huge advantage of that, especially for the disabilities community. Anyway, Pokemon Go is this most amazing, phenomenon. I mean, at one point I went to a park right when it was happening in Bellevue, where there was about 20,000 people roaming around this park playing Pokemon Go together, just running into each other. It was a big mess. But it's really incredible. They really were loving this idea of an augmented world, and then of course sharing it with each other, which is always what people do. They always do things for social reasons. And so we have these people like, in 1838 making stereo viewers, and in 1856 they actually made a movie theater where like they had these shutters that would flop up and down in front of people, and the first real big success in augmented reality was the Link Trainer in 1929. People forget about it, but it was a place you got inside and you pretended you were flying. It saved thousands of airplanes and lives by doing this, and this guy became extremely rich. The Link Trainer it was a phenomenon that really today, even today, if those people that were flying those the 737s had some training in their problem, they probably wouldn't have had that problem. And simulation is always a good way to learn. So yeah, as I said, the head-mounted patent, I'm sorry, of 1945, pointer, was pretty prescient. And then this guy, Morton Helling, in 1957, he made a little room you sit in, a little kiosk at a mall in Hollywood. And it had vibration, it had light, it had sound, and it had imagery. And he tried to make a go of it doing Hollywood-style stuff. Didn't do so well. And then here he is again. This is actually Morton Helling in 1961 with his VR glasses. So VR glasses have been around that long. This poor guy, I think his wife is still paying off his debts. There's a picture of him in this little thing. He had a few pieces of content, but I don't think it was useful enough to people. And I think that's one problem we really have today, is that people like you, people like us, doing things that really support things that are really needed, are going to be where this stuff makes sense a lot more than the big fantasy world that everyone's trying to do. A lot of the companies are trying to make gaming be the center of this industry. So this guy here is the first guy to be trying to work with somebody that's somewhere else. So they were trying to work in, you have some radioactive place that you don't want to be, and you can see what it's like to be there. That was done by Philco. And again, that seeing eyes, that stuff that we're doing where I can sit at my desk somewhere in Colorado and help somebody in New York City get across the street, that's already happening. Here's a guy trying to play football in 1965 while having first-person video so other people can have the experience that he has. Of course, the hero does that for us today, and being able to experience other people's experiences is a worthy thing. At MIT, they were a little bit more geeky, and they came on later, but got more credit for it. And that's the sword of Damocles. It was named that because it's so weird looking, but also it was going to be a VR system that you could use for design and engineering. So entertainment, seeing things, and design were right with at the beginning. In the 1980s, NASA got a bunch of money and threw it at a guy named, a friend of mine named Jaron Lanier, and they made these $50,000 suits that could tell where you were, as well as make a VR experience. Not much came of it. And then in the 90s, not much came of a gigantic amount of commercialization effort. I tried to work with some of these companies back then, but at that same time, there are these three guys down here that I was working with at MIT. And Steve Mann, he's up in Toronto, and he is always trying to say, I want to be able to see the world as it needs to be for me. And he always just has a camera. He's been doing that for 20 years. Brad Rhodes, he made something called Remembrance Agent. Whatever he was doing, he was always recording it and then being able to recall it later. Very useful for people with cognitive disabilities. He wrote a PhD thesis on that. And we have Thad Starner. Thad Starner is now has helped with the HoloLens. He's at Georgia Tech now. Continues to live his life, always wearing this. And his thesis was actually around speech to text in the context of interacting with these kinds of things. So it had that thing. And there's a fourth one, Rich Duvall. Oh, there's this picture up there. And Rich Duvall, he made a system where if you walked up to a kiosk, it would remember the person's name and tell that person's name to you based on where you were. It was a cognitive disabilities support system. He didn't get as much airplay as some of the others, but that's what he was doing in 2001. So, and also he had his setup was uglier. You see, it's a big vest compared to the other guys who had it pretty much. But that doesn't matter. I think it was really great stuff. Now, so many companies. I mean, everybody thinks that they have a reason and way to make some kind of an augmented reality or virtual reality thing. Virtual reality is when you're looking only at the whole world that's made inside of you, and that's been used for a lot of these, making a world where you're getting operated on and they're showing you some fantasy world of snow, that's distracting you. That stuff is virtual reality. Augmented reality is when you see something out in the world, like some text on it, and the only people right now that's been making money in the VR, AR world are the augmented reality people that make a list of things for you to do while you're shipping something or while you're making something in a factory. These kind of augmented reality applications with lists of things for you to do are very applicable to the cognitive disabilities community, and they are the ones that are actually making money right now. All of the people that are making games and stuff like that, the Microsoft are not actually selling enough to support their $1 billion of investment. I mean, I would say that Microsoft has put Magic Leap, Microsoft, and Oculus have all put in multiple billions of dollars into this industry. So, it'd be unclear how they take it out, but I think that we, the cognitive disabilities community, are going to get a lot of value out of it. And so these are a bunch of the ones that were made by people. So today's headsets are getting to have a large box of viewing angle. Maybe the first HoloLens, it was a box about like that. Magic Leap that I worked on is about this big, and the Magic HoloLens 2 is pretty big. So you have a world where you can do more than just augmented reality with a list, but mixed reality, where you can mix in something that looks like it's in the real world. It can go over and show you on this where the switch is to turn on. It can make you aware of a plug that's available over here by highlighting it. So that's when we talk about mixed reality. What we've gotten to is, sure, the 80s and the 90s we made something. It had lag. They were very low resolution. Today's everything all the way down to the cheap $200 things have high resolution, great color, great sensing, and are really ready for those amazing applications that we think we can make. A lot of the fantasy, if you want to see what people have envisioned, there's a guy named Keiichi Matsuda, and he has a lovely set of videos about what it's going to be like to live in a world where when you're walking down an aisle in a grocery store, it shows you what things cost, where you're trying to get the next thing on your list, and why you should choose this one versus that one. And it's kind of a dystopia, but it's very relevant to the issues that people in this community think about. And if you people are already making climbing walls where it's trying to encourage you and show you where to go and how to do things. This again is, I think, quite relevant to our community. And so, you know, it's convenient viewing. Well, I'm going to just say the compelling imagery has been what the industry's tried to hype it with, and I find the dramatic imagery not nearly as compelling as useful, productive things. And so I'm not going to say anything much about that, but I'm going to say that in 1989, long ago, I went to SIGGRAPH, a very nice conference, where I saw two uses of VR that were useful, and were already being used. And this one was especially impressive in that it was saving people's lives. They hung these paratroopers 2 inches off the ground in a paratrooper suit, and they pulled on one cord or the other to guide towards a cross on top of a building viewed below. Because the building's so far away, the lag didn't bother them in terms of doing a high fidelity simulation. And these guys were having 1/10 as many broken legs and mistakes in their actual jumps after they'd gone through this training. So training has been a long-standing goal for what people do with this stuff, but that one was the first one I know of that actually got deployed and really saved a lot of people's lives. The one on the right was done by the VR Rehab R&D Lab in Illinois, and just two sensors, one on each of the wheels, and you're exploring if you've got your injury and you become a paraplegic, you're exploring your home and figuring out what has to be changed about your home so you can get through it in a wheelchair. It was not expensive, and I don't know how widely it got deployed, but I was totally impressed with it. I think these kind of things are gonna be part of our lives. People have tried to augment cars with augmented reality. I won't say too much about that, but it's been going on since the 80s and hasn't made too much impact. In fact, one of the dangers that we know of is some of the first examples of cockpit support. They'd have a place where you're supposed to drive your airplane, and if it's too well painted in your mixed reality, you wouldn't see something coming across your line of view. So there's really a trade-off between keeping your perception, keeping your orientation, and learning the things that you need to learn to navigate that are based on things. And so I will just say that basically people look in different ways. And so this is a very early piece of work that showed that if you ask different questions to a person looking at the same picture, their eye tracking was completely different. I did a whole lot of research in this area and built a whole lot of demonstrations, but I think that the real take-home message has to be that we have to understand what people are thinking in order to support them in any way, especially when we're gonna mess with what their eyes see. And you know, I had a piece of work recently where we found when we measured a whole lot of different ways of telling if a person was overloaded while they're driving, whether they were going to make a mistake, all we had to do is look at the very low resolution camera at the eye, and we could tell that they were overloaded and going to start making mistakes and reduce their cognitive load. This kind of thing, we are all in danger of being cognitively disabled by trying to do too much, and there are ways of recognizing when we are not going to succeed. And I think that's going to be another exciting thing for us to do in these things. You know, these things that these demonstrations to going to mainstream are pervasive, and I've talked about them enough. I don't want to have too much more time, but there's many of them. Just saying that the mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality world is alive. It is not very profitable yet, but it is alive, and it's going to be available for us to use. And really, the issue is how do we, if we're using something that we're wearing, we have to be focused, not distracted, and aware of our situation. And the really question of what we're going to use it for is, in my view, What is my focus? What is important in my focus? What is important in this mixed reality that I really should be paying attention to or not? You know, and you know how much is this added thing causing more problems for me? And when is it good to communicate or not to a person with this technology? Because the outside world and outside awareness is so desperately important. And what modality should we be communicating with a person? And you know, what should be focused and what should be peripheral? It's very important to be aware of a lot of things, but if you don't focus on one thing, those things that you're not supposed to be aware of actually become your focus, and you have problems from that. And how long should these things be pushing themselves on you? I'm sorry, just as a designer of AR and VR stuff, we have to think about these things. And you know, when things are moving, our brain just can't not look at it. And so, you know, when you have stuff moving in your viewpoint, just because you can do it with this technology doesn't mean you very much should do it. Because as soon as you move it, your eyes go to there, and whatever you're supposed to be looking at, you're not looking at. And if it's too bright, is it going to make it harder for you to look at other things, like that airplane I told about, where people missed the truck going across the runway and ran into it? Don't want that to happen either. So lots of things to think about as designers. And you know, this, I don't even know if I have this video. Oops, I don't. Okay, well, oh, there. Let me see if I can play this video. No. All right. Well, anyway, there's some videos online that you can see that people make big mistakes by looking at other things. I guess I'm just gonna give one example of something I made, which was an immersive experience for people with Alzheimer's, where they thought they were in a room and they had all these things they could do in there. And the real important thing for Alzheimer's patients was not to bring their attention to all the things they can't do, but to let them do things that they can. And that brings people together with their caregivers and reduces actually the amount of even medicine that's required to keep them calm. And so we had an application where they be arranging flowers or arranging things in a garden, you know, putting all these tools away, or looking through an old Sears magazine. And what was impressive to me, that kaleidoscope is something that it makes these images, and if you don't like them, you press on a button. If you do like them, you just keep watching, because Alzheimer's people are critically sophisticated and productively challenged. And it was really fun, because what I found with these things is they were compelling enough that people would skip lunch to play them, right? And when you find something that, you know, the most important thing in some of these people's lives is food. It is in mine. When they were playing that, I think that it really means that we can give people experiences that bring them together with their caregivers and their loved ones, and make them act more competent and comfortable, without requiring them to be something they can't be, which is something to remember, you know, who somebody is that's visiting them, that's going to remember, you know, what they did as a job, and recognize this picture that somebody took 45 years ago and stuff like that. So that's, I guess, what I will leave you with, is that I think that there's tremendous possibilities for VR and AR, that we are in an incredible inflection point where the stuff has become cheap and really high quality, but the problem is that most of the people that are developing it are spending a lot of time thinking about how to make shoot-em-up games, and we really have to think and be the designers that create things that are going to not distract people, that are going to make them more aware of their environment and more aware of their capabilities, and support them in feeling good about themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think we're going to go ahead and we'll save some time for questions at the end. We've got a few more things we want to get through.
Sure.
So what we're going to do now is let me go ahead and change over to the presentation that follows. So bear with me a moment. Wait for it. Okay. Again, we have Megan Little and myself from Imagine, and Bob and Brenda from Reality Garage. And Bob, if you wouldn't mind, I would love it if you could get us started with a few things that you can tell us about VR now today.
Sure. Okay. So, oh, thank you. So we have Reality Garage, which we're production studio #1, but we also have the lounge with lots of equipment. So playing with lots of different gear and creating stuff. So some of the key terms here. So let me see. I think in the bag over there is a Oculus Go in the paperback. So there's different devices, different things that you can do with the different devices. So this is the Oculus Go, which is $200 device, which is great. This pretty good resolution on this. This is now what they call 3 degrees of freedom. So basically, it's like a tripod. You're on a tripod, you can move around, but the tripod doesn't move. So if I put this headset on and I present you a door to walk through, and you start walking, you're not going to walk through the door. You're just going to keep looking at the door. But this is really effective for if everybody can hear. This is really effective for VR films. That's a VR film camera that's recording right now, so everybody can wave. So it actually has 280-degree lenses, and so it's recording monoscopic 360. That'll play on. So this headset is a 5K video, which is really good resolution. So in fact, when it's playtime, you can go skydiving on this thing, and it's pretty cool. Anyway, so 6 degrees of freedom is something that up until about 6 months or so ago, you would have had to have a computer, unless you had all the $3,000 HoloLens, to get 6 degrees of freedom. So if I actually put the headset on and I start walking, it's actually tracking me in that space. Facebook, who bought Oculus was a Kickstarter, very successful Kickstarter startup, and Oculus bought it for a couple of $2 billion or whatever. And there's a nice long drama around that because there was a guy that stole software, and then he got proved guilty for stealing software. Anyways, so the Oculus Quest over here has got 4 cameras on it, and it uses computer vision, the same sort of technology for self-driving cars. It actually generates a computer model of the room that you're in, and as you start walking through it, it tracks you in that space. So those are, basically those are the kind of key elements. Another kind of interesting fact, when we're looking at a screen like this, we're looking, or a movie screen or something like that, you're looking at like 24 or 30 frames per second. In the headset, it's generating it at 90 frames per second. Because if I turn and it's not updating it at 90 frames per second, it feels really awkward. And then there's two eyes. So it's really 180 frames per second that has to be generated in the headset for this thing to work. So the technology is really, it's pretty clever stuff. But it's evolving quick. This has got Qualcomm chips in it, system on a chip sort of thing. So the same sort of technology that drives your phone also drives this, but they're making it such that they're upping the, I think your phone does everything your phone's ever going to do, but they're still building chips that are smarter and faster and better. Those chips are going to be driving these types of devices. I think that's it. Is that a good?
Did you want to talk a little bit more about?
Well, interactive versus linear experience, I guess. So that's. We've done quite a few productions with the VR film cameras. There's lots of, like, we call it a VR film because literally, your classic film maker can control what you're looking at. In VR, you can't control what the user's looking at, because the user can go do this, right? So making a VR film is more challenging than making a linear or a regular flat screen film. But then there's a lot of VR films that are just still linear. It's a story that has a beginning and an end, and it doesn't you can't interact with that story. We've actually done VR films that I call interactive VR films that you can actually interact with. So what you're doing affects what the film is. So I've got one scene when you're in a cabin, you're looking at the fireplace. If you look at the fireplace lights. If I look and turn around, there's a stuffed bear, he growls at you. Things like that, which is really It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. So that's interactive. And this, what you're going to see today, the training is completely interactive. You could call it a game, but it's not a game. We are training individuals with cognitive disabilities how to work at Left Hand Brewery. It's really fun. So, which we'll see how that works. I think that's accessibility. Yeah. So I think you're going to cover the accessibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So one of the things that actually had come up when we're talking about accessibility, so you may have seen when we pulled out the headsets, we also pulled out controllers, and that is immediately, that can be prohibitive for anyone who if they have fine and gross motor skill challenges. The necessity of those controllers is a big stopping point for us. And it was really exciting because when we had first struck our partnership and we were just sort of talking about what we think could be possible, we started exploring some of the custom content that Reality Garage has created, their interactive Safari experiences, for example. And instead of making them relying on controllers to navigate through the experiences, they had these little visual hotspots that we highlighted in bright green. And when you're ready to progress to a new area or the next phase or development of that experience, you could simply look at those hotspots and progress through. So it sort of ended up being a more accessible approach by accident. So obviously there's not as much that you can do just by looking at a spot. You can do a great deal more with more controller access. So one of the things that Oculus has just announced is coming in 2020. They will actually support an experimental hands-free feature. So just the same way that the Quest models the environment, so that you draw yourself a boundary, and this is where you declare, okay, it is safe for me to work in this space. I won't step on any chairs, trip, anything like that. It will also model your hand, and then just the action of you moving your hands will interact with your environment. Like I say, it's going to be experimental in 2020. I can't give any more information than that, other than we're kind of excited to see what happens. Coming up next, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the partnership between Reality Garage and Imagine, because it's really cool. And I said I was going to talk about it, but I'm not going to tell that story.
Hi. So, thank you, Chris. Yeah. So we have a lounge in Boulder, so people can come in. It's open to the public to play with VR. And we also have our production studio, and having a lounge is really helpful because we get to see what people like and just using different hardware and assets evolving. So we get to learn a lot from others trying it. And there was a woman who came into our space, and she, with her family, and she has a sister who's at one of Imagine's smart homes in Boulder. And at this time, I didn't know it was connected with Imagine. And she wanted to know if we could bring headsets to the residents of this home. And so we did. This is a picture from that day. And the gentleman on the left there, it was so moving for me to see how happy he was. I believe he's watching a giraffe right there. And it just was a significant moment for me to see how VR can bring the world to people and open up their world. And on the other side, the gentleman in the back, he just smiled and laughed. And so this afternoon really clicked for us on this is where VR for good, which is our mission, is using VR for good, can really make an impact. So that was our first introduction to working with individuals at the smart home. And then a little bit later, Megan had heard about us. And yeah.
So I reached out to Reality Garage and just said, hey, we're really looking for more technology in our day program, and we're very interested in VR and seeing how that would work with individuals. And so we went and we tested out the site with a group of individuals, and now we have a class every Tuesday that goes there. And so what's really cool is you can see this was new, we got introduced this week, an individual riding a bike to, give him some exercise, experience different things. We have another individual that really wants to learn how to drive, and so he's learning on the VR system how to drive. And you can see up top that it's casting so that we can help direct them as well in the environment, which is a huge piece in terms of teaching and supporting them to feel comfortable in the environment and just making sure that they're doing the right steps or supporting them the correct way. And then this individual over here, I believe he was doing Spider-Man for fun, so that was that part for him.
Yeah, one of the things that we've really learned working with this group coming in weekly, a couple of things. There are many people who think of VR as being very isolating, and that's one of the negatives of VR. What we have found in our experience of 3 years working with individuals is that it's actually a very social thing, especially with the casting, because other people can watch what your friend or whoever you're with is doing in the headset. And I can't tell you how many times people whip out their phones because they want to videotape their friend doing something in VR. So it actually becomes a very social interactive in that way. And the other thing we've learned is working with these individuals over the last 6 months that they've been coming in, they're so much more friendly and just feel comfortable with us. And I think it's really been a learning experience for me on creating an environment that they feel safe, and then I'm learning just as much from them as they're learning from us. And that's just been, it's one of the highlights of my week. Also seeing, there's an individual who the first time she came in, she wanted nothing to do with virtual reality. So she just observed. But now 6 months later, it's been a progression where at first she would just look at the headset from a distance and then maybe put it up to her face. Well, now she's sitting in it for 45 minutes and on a Broadway stage, and she's singing along with the Broadway music. So that's just, I think, rewarding for everyone involved. So I think those were the main things that we've learned from working with them.
And then we wanted to also make sure we introduce about our partnership with Left Hand. We've been with Left Hand, working with Left Hand for over 20 years. We have a great relationship with them. They are so willing to work with us, and they were very excited about this project that we were doing and very inviting to let us take video footage of their site and put it into a VR headset. And so that has been very great, but there are some challenges that we face with the work site, and we'll kind of explain those as we go through.
Yeah, and with this stage, what was really critical here is, as Ted had mentioned, how the application of VR is still in the early stages, which means that it's so important that there are those out there that can see the value and that are willing to kind of jump in and give it a try. And so that's where Chris and Megan have been amazing, because it really is a true partnership where we have the technical expertise on how to put together a VR experience, and they have the experience of working with individuals with cognitive disabilities that they want to help support them being independent. And so it's a true partnership of working very close with each other and creating something that will be useful. Because that's the goal, is we're using game design technology to create something that is applied to the real world and can really have an impact on individuals. So I'm grateful to Chris and Megan for being at that kind of forefront of thinking.
Go for it. Yeah, sure.
So can we build a VR experience that will teach individuals to perform the job functions at Left Hand? So this was a big challenge for us at first, because we're like, how do we do that? And we sat down with Brenda and Bob, and we discussed a lot of things. And as we went through it, one thing that came up, and we'll kind of talk more about, is aerialist learning, which I feel like most of you guys will know about, and how we can
this was the challenge that we set out for ourselves. And so we kind of had to examine the tools that already exist, what we're working with right now. And so we've got a screenshot here of video prompting that we use on an iPad for an individual. And one of the immediate challenges that you find is no matter how robust these pictures and these videos are, there is no mechanism that determines whether or not you actually completed that task, i.e., if the task is 27 steps long, well, I can break out, I got videos for every single step and say, hey, when you're ready, click that next button. But there's nothing that stops you from, cool, next, I surely have completed the job, fantastic. So this has been a huge limitation that we've been running into with any of our prompting systems up to date. What's interesting about this is our ability to overcome that in the VR experience didn't even occur to us until we actually started working on this experience. It was an accidental, we were talking about it and presenting kind of what we were thinking about doing, and we had that aha moment. And so recognizing that we could actually employ errorless learning techniques, which I'm going to talk about in a second, into this VR experience, which we felt like already before we even started, really, we felt like that had the potential to be a huge game changer. Do you have more on that, Megan?
And then the only other thing that, besides like using the iPad to help individuals train, is our staff have to help them. And usually we have, right now we have 2 crews, and there's usually 14 people and 2 staff. And so supporting everyone in that environment can be very challenging to make sure everyone gets the best support that they need in order to complete the job correctly. So with implementing the VR, we're hoping that we could train staff better and also train individuals to be more independent in the work site.
So, I do want to talk to you guys a little bit about errorless learning. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about it, but I definitely, when I come to Coleman, I have often the experience of having no idea what a lot of people are talking about, because generally we have experts in their field here. So I always try to make sure that we make sure that I'm making no assumptions on what people know. So we wanted to, that's why I thank you, Bob, for going through some of the basic terminology on VR, and thank you, Ted, for your background on VR and AR. So errorless learning, this is not a new thing. This has been around for several decades now. If you're ever curious to know more about the reasons of errorless learning, Murray Sidman is your guy. He started publishing materials on this in 1970, but I wanted to highlight a couple of really important concepts. And that is, learning need not be a trial and error process for the pupil, though it may be for the teacher. The reality of errorless learning shifts the responsibility of learning from the pupil to the teacher, and the proper study of learning becomes the study of teaching. So a lot of conventional teaching models still in schools today, the onus of learning is on the student. If the student fails to learn, then the student has failed to learn. We're starting to see more of that shift in perspective to what are some new or different teaching mechanisms that we can employ so that I, as a teacher, can successfully teach you the skills that you need. There are a lot of tenets that go that are part of the errorless learning philosophy. One of the things that you'll see very frequently is a commonly used hierarchy of prompting when you're teaching skills from least to most support. And I'm going to break that down a little bit for you here. So level 0 prompting level, we've got the skills independent, you've already got it, no additional support is needed, right on. If more support is needed, environmental and positional prompting comes up a lot. So if you've ever stuck a sticky note on your mirror, that's an environmental prompt to remind you to do something. And then beyond that, if that low level of reminder doesn't work, then certainly you can have someone actually give you an auditory, hey Chris, remember to brush your teeth this morning. And that level of prompting is also very commonly used in conversational agents that we're seeing a lot more with your smart speakers like Alexa and Google, Echo Dots, Echoes, Google Homes, things of that nature. And then beyond that, if you're teaching a skill and the verbal prompt doesn't get you there, you've still got that modeling or a pointing prompt, like, hey man, your toothbrush is going to be right here. If I still struggle with that, then I may need even more support where we look into partial or full physical systems. So if I'm still unable to brush my teeth, oh, Chris, I'm left-handed, so use this, your left hand, to grab your toothbrush and brush your teeth. And if that's still not the case, then we can use hand over hand, or conventionally I prefer hand underhand assistance to assist someone in brushing their teeth. The reason that we employ this so often, and it's especially valuable for the IDP community, but generally, this is just teaching in general. It's great to have the opportunity to finish a skill or finish a task successfully. I get that satisfaction of having completed it. And you, as someone who might be my educator, has the opportunity to say, great job, you did it. I also know you may still need this level of support. So I'm not necessarily ready to send you out to work at Left Hand. You still need more support. We're not ready for that yet. But you are able to successfully complete all of this. So that's the model that we've been using for decades. But how does that translate into a virtual reality experience? Well, so we had a couple of novel, interesting things. So we're going to start with level 1. When someone incorrectly performs a step, or let's say if it's time in the sequence to grab bottle number 1, but I reach for bottle number 2, I've actually got arrows that will redirect. This is your environmental prompting. Now outside of that, an additional level, so verbal prompting, obviously that translates pretty straightforward. So then pointing and modeling, we thought that was a new and interesting thing. So what we've actually done, and this is fairly novel, so in this VR experience, we actually have 360-degree video, we have CG or computer-generated, computer-generated elements, and also the two-dimensional window pane that will provide that additional level of modeling and prompting. In the event that someone is still unable to successfully complete that task, then we get to what would be it's analogous to full physical prompting in a VR experience, which is essentially all of the environment is more or less disabled with the exception of the one object that is the correct next step. And everything points to that, and it's the only thing you can interact with. So once you've completed that, then everything starts over again. So that's essentially how we were able to translate that teaching and learning model into the VR environment. That was my idea. So I can't make that. I am not a coder, nor do I play one on TV. So this is where Reality Garage comes in. And Bob, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on building that.
Okay, and what's the time check here? Because I want to make sure we definitely have time to go through all this.
35 minutes.
35 minutes. Okay, so
let's say we have 25 minutes.
okay, because we definitely want to be putting the headset on and going.
Yeah,
through
we want you all to be able to play.
And take questions too. So I'll just do this really quick. So basically, building a VR experience is just a lot of technology around that. So there's 2D and 3D, 360 video. So that's a monoscopic, I should have called it. So that camera's monoscopic, 360-degree video. Other cameras have more lenses, and then you can do stereoscopic 360-degree videos. Very immersive. 2D flat videos, you could actually do a 3D flat video in VR as well. So it's like watching a 3D television set, but while you're in VR. There's computer graphic elements, so modeled and flat. So just real quick, this picture up top there, if you opened up a 360-degree stereoscopic video on a player that doesn't support it, that's what you're going to look like. So it's an equirectangular sort of capture, and in the left eye's on top and the right eye's on bottom. For modeling stuff, you create a mesh model of your thing, and then you take your texture and your material map, and then the computer software says, oh, okay, great, I've got my skeleton, I got my skin, I put it together, and that's what happens. So, but in this experience, we've got, I don't know how many bottles, we got cases of beer, we got 4 cases of beer, and you can see all those bottles at once. You've got to optimize things, and we're having lots of fun doing all this technology. And then obviously the interaction software that says I've got my timers, I got my prompts, I got all that sort of stuff. And then it's one thing to get it to play on a headset that's connected to computers. Another thing to say, oh, it's going to work on a headset driven by a mobile device. And storage size stuff. So everything we tend to try not to stream anything because it doesn't perform so well. If you've got a 4K or a 5K video and you're streaming it, you don't get good performance. So basically, we just make sure everything's downloaded and stored on the device.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. So, I want to talk a little bit about the evolution. Actually, I want you to talk a little bit about the evolution.
Oh, me?
Yeah, man.
So when we first started this project, we got the first one up here where the green box and the little cardboard box. That was our first model of it. And so there's a little video clip if you want to play it. And you can see that, you know, we're just kind of testing it out. There's a table, there's still the sky in the background. And the bottles are just blank. So there's nothing on them. There's no decorative stuff on them. And that was the start of the project. And then if you look over here where it says tutorial and training, that's where we're at right now. That's where we've kind of developed things. That's okay. And so the environment has really changed, and it's very identical to the one we have at our site. But you guys put it in 2D, is that correct? So that it's not too alike to the real environment, so they don't feel like they're actually there. They can make the difference between being in the VR headset and being at the left-hand side, but also making that generalization between the environments to translate the skills over.
Outstanding. So, I want to talk just a little bit more about that evolution, and then
That's it for the video.
this video. Super. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. I don't know if we actually talked about what the job actually is at Left Hand. I meant to. So if you've ever seen a mountain mixer, Left Hand mountain mixer in any of your liquor stores, it's their mixed 12 pack. It will have been packaged by someone who receives services from Imagine. So you take 4 cases of beer, and then you take 3 bottles from each flavor. It's very specific, very prescriptive. You've got 3 bottles, 4 flavors, equals 12. It's got to be the same every time. Their double check mechanism is a little, it's rough. At the end of the day, if you have too many of one beer, not enough of another, or vice versa, whatever, somehow your count is off, someone made a mistake somewhere along the way, your job now is to unpack every single box that you have packaged all day. Find the mistake, rectify the mistake, redo all of it. Very time intensive, and that usually falls to some of our supportive employment assistants. So, accuracy is key, and that was one of the reasons that we felt such a good candidate for this project, because we can really provide that next level teaching without necessarily being on the site. So yeah.
Which is also the hardest part, is that a lot of times we can't be on the site to train because they're either doing other things, or we need to get that work done now so that the next shipment can come in. And so the training piece was always something that we struggled with. So being able to put this in VR has been very wonderful to try to help with that training piece.
Great. All that said, thank you guys for letting us talk to you about virtual reality, which of course, talking about it is the most fun part. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up naturally, because we don't want to, show you anything fun or exciting, because we're horrible humans like that.
Do you want us to show the mirroring of how it looks?
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
really.
kidding, of course. You guys want to see what this actually looks like? Cool.
Is it one?
Yeah. This is a technical process, which means it will work flawlessly, immediately. You should all have reasonable expectations. Everything will be perfect right this second.
And
Just
Chris
kidding.
had talked about the hands-free, without having the hand controllers. That's going to be a game. This system that he has on here is a game changer, in the sense that he doesn't have to be tethered to a computer, and an expensive computer. These cost $400, and so with all this hardware, the prices just keep going down.
Are you
And-
connected? It's not mirroring.
One thing that I should point out,
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
woo, fewer technical difficulties than I had anticipated. So Megan had talked about, or Brenda, I think you talked about the importance of casting.
Do they see the?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So you said
And
your guardian?
this isn't a.
Okay, so this, as you can see, I can actually set my
Give me the
walls
microphone.
here. So I'm gonna confirm the guardian.
So he just set his plate
Bob, I'm gonna be
area.
in front of you with the microphones.
He can
But
see.
I'll try to avoid your hands. So you
Okay.
can't see me.
Okay, so we're gonna launch this thing, where'd it go? Magic Beer Trainer. We had a lot of fun making this, by the way.
You had a lot of fun playing it.
Yeah. I think the next goal is if we want to, do 100 bottles of beer on the wall.
I'm just gonna chime in real quick.
Please.
So one cool thing about the Oculus Quest is that you can make your boundary, which we kind of talked about before, so that you don't run into a chair or anything, which was a huge piece that we also needed, because that's like a fear of mine, like running into a chair or stepping down off of a step and not being able to see it. So this is the actual environment of Left Hand. It's a little messy. Our crew is in the back there, and then we package all the beer back there.
Okay, so now we can do tutorial or training. So the tutorial is the first thing you do.
Yeah.
But once they've learned it, then they go to training. But we'll do the tutorial.
Okay. So you guys may have trouble hearing it because the casting will report audio out with some extra things. But there are a couple things that I'm actually going to talk about while you see me talking about things. It's very meta. All right. So what Bob's doing right now is grabbing box from Station 1, and you can see that the whole time there's a video that's playing right now that will give you instructions on each of the steps as they go through. Now, Bob is a professional. He has been doing this for a long time, so he's obviously not paying that much attention to the video. Something I want to point out that's really extraordinary is when Bob finishes this box here, before I get a chance to finish, the video will actually catch up to him, so this is a self-paced tutorial process. That's one of the things that we thought was really important because we want to garner a certain amount of buy-in with our individuals. So Bob's already playing with the bottles. Oh, thank you for putting that back, Bob. I appreciate that. So in a moment, one of the things that I'm going to have Bob do is be less good at his job.
Okay.
Because it's always great to see how things work when everything's working perfectly. So Bob's trying to go for the wrong bottle, and the wrong bottle, and the wrong bottle. And so we're getting the errors to redirect. Now, have we modified those mechanics? Oh, that's fantastic. So, a lot of VR experiences right now, it's very common to have people be given the ability to take objects and throw them. And that's just part of a fun, the gamification, as it were. People love playing games where they can throw things. Okay. I actually don't want people to generalize that skill in the workplace where they can throw glass bottles. I would rather that not be a thing. So what happens here is when you try to throw a bottle, nothing happens. There's nothing fun about it. There is something fun about successful completion each time, and you can't hear it very well, but there's a little, it sounds like Candy Crush, kind of, that little, like, a little plink plink with a little sparkle fireworks that say, hey, you did a great job, fantastic. So, I want to slow us down a little bit, Bob. Can you look down at your box? Okay, so one of the double check mechanisms here is all those labels need to be facing forward. It's a quick way that they can do a double check without having to open up all the boxes at the end of the day. So it's a really important step. So we want to make sure that we include the ability to twist the labels until they're actually facing out the window. Now from a mechanical standpoint, that can be a little challenging just from a coding perspective. And kind of an absolutely outstanding
And I
job of
think
that.
you may not have the latest software.
There have been updates that have been done since we've gotten this. I should also point out, this is still very much in process. We're going to talk to you a little bit about some of our data collection and what's going to happen. Where we're at right now is, I think that you might be working on build 2, and there's a Mark III that's pending that is fixing a couple of those usability issues.
So I found this to be an interesting step, that you have to put the cardboard divider on the nitro beers. So.
The reason that those go on the nitro beers is that if you don't put a divider in there, which has also happened many times, if you don't put a divider in there, they explode. Because they are nitro beer. So it's very important for that stuff to be in there. And that piece gets missed a lot too, of that divider not going in there. And then Left Hand's like, hey, we had like 10 packs like explode on us. And we're like, oh no, we don't have
is this image that we were streaming and watching, was that the left eye, the right eye, or some sort of average of the two?
That's a good question. It's probably just one of the eyes. Probably just the left eye. I don't know.
Oh, it's not.
Where's the source toggle?
It's not casting. It's,
I don't care about the casting toggle.
Oh.
I wanted to change back to
Oh, yeah.
HDMI 1.
So you can pick the eye with the app.
You can pick which one.
You can pick which eye you're casting.
So in our earlier development, we didn't have any of the arrows. Oh, sorry, I was
Oh, sorry.
talking about
Back.
the arrows for like the divider, which was a piece like when a lot of our staff did it that have never worked at Left Hand. They would try to move the box without the divider, and so we were like, oh, it'd be really helpful to put an arrow there to indicate that you need that step next. And then turning the box was also a piece. You don't want to actually pick up the box because there's no tape on the bottom. It goes on the conveyor and then puts tape on. And so that was a piece too that people try to pick up the box and then all the beer comes out of it. And that's not very helpful. And then sliding it on the conveyor to indicate it to go onto the line. So all of those little visuals are really helpful to keep that job training piece going and to hopefully eliminate some of those errors that we have at the job site.
So, that brings us to the most exciting thing. Nothing in the world works without data. So, we still think this is going to be a really cool, really effective idea. Something that we should point out, that iPad prompting mechanism that I showed you earlier, it's cheaper. It is cheaper than building a custom VR experience. Now, one of the things that we have talked about when building these out is, so Reality Garage put together some amazing infrastructure for all of their coding so that in the future, generalizing to other job sites should be significantly easier for them, a lot more streamlined, and a lot of those things is going to be tremendous. But we still want to check to see how effective is this as an intervention versus some of the older interventions. Again, we have a pretty strong hypothesis. We think this is going to be more effective, but we need to get our data. So we've got essentially 10 trials of individuals who are basically performing 4 mix packs. That's one discrete trial. This is actually where we're at right now. So we have our test groups set aside. We have our baseline data collected. So the next thing is going to work on control with existing supports, and then looking at how this generalizes with those with the VR intervention supports. Did I ask anything on that?
No, yeah, and what's nice about this data collection is that it breaks it down by the box and by the step. And so if we notice that at box 2 they're always messing up, then we know that's where we need to work with them on in like the VR headset or in the live training or in the iPad. And so we are trying to compare this with the iPad, so we have the same data collection for both. And then it graphs it and everything so that we can easily translate that to the families or their providers to let them know of like, hey, here's where the individual is at, here's the next steps that we need to take for better training to support with that.
Additionally, and this is another exciting component to having a VR experience, so we actually have passive data collection when people are doing the demo trials. So, and that's pending the next build. But essentially what happens is, in those same steps, we can see when someone is working in the VR experience, we can see how many times did you need that redirection? So how many false steps did you make? And what level of support did you require? If at every step you're still getting to, okay, cool man, so you need to work on this object right here, and now it's the only object that's available to you. If that's going through every step, we clearly understand, okay, so we're not ready yet for the job site. So that's also, that's something that we can actually have the headset collecting for us, so that manually collected data is tedious, is often inaccurate, and is unreliable. So,
Did you get it delivered? Because I thought we delivered it, but.
Oh, you might have. We've been scrambling a lot this week in preparation for this.
I think it's done, but anyway.
Awesome. We may or may not have it. We'll find out. Okay, so now that we've covered that, kind of want to talk a little bit about.
Message from last?
Oh, so nothing yet. We have baseline, and potentially we have our final build, so we can actually start running our direct discrete trial tests.
Yeah.
So we'll let you know.
We did want to start testing it out with individuals until we had like a full one, because we don't want to start teaching them the wrong skills of like being able to throw the bottle or something like that. So we want to teach them the skills correctly first. So we've been testing it out on staff and everything to see what errors have been occurring and what needed to be adjusted. And so hopefully, yeah, at the final one we can start collecting more data on people.
Absolutely. So what we just talked about is our baseline data collection and our review data collection is going to be in the real world with real objects. And then they're learning through virtual reality. So there's still a piece of how well does that generalize? And this is where things get a little bit interesting because some people may generalize really easily between the virtual reality and, I don't know, IRL reality, between virtual reality and reality. So one of the things that we would love to see in the future, as we start building this out to other job sites and other job trainings, is to potentially supplement that generalization process with smart class and machine learning and augmented reality, so that you can actually have real bottles in real time and testing to ensure that people are successfully completing things as they go. So we're not even talking about that yet, but that's something that we're looking at in the future. You guys want to talk some more future stuff? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, we'll just do it real quick because I know we're running out of time. So I think in terms of AR and VR, so I think Ted talked a lot about the augmented reality. Those devices, they're really expensive. So the HoloLens is $3,000, Magic Leap's $1,200 or $1,800, or
And they're finicky.
And they're finicky. So that technology is a ways away. I think smart glasses, there's probably some good applications to take smart glasses combined with artificial intelligence or machine learning and so forth, and audio prompting and so forth. I think the other thing that I'm excited to do is multi-person experience. So you could be in the VR headset, but your teacher or your guidance, or you could have another virtual person there helping you, or somebody remote, or a parent, or somebody. So I think that's kind of nice. And then mashing that up with the augmented reality as well. We went to a conference last week, our group, Olympics, I think they actually had, you put on the VR headset and you're presented, it's an anxiety sort of thing, and you're at this dinner table, and they're actually, the video plays and people are talking to you, and they're waiting for an answer before the video continues. So they're actually prompting you to actually talk back to this conversation before the video continues. I thought it's brilliant.
Yeah, because that was for social anxiety.
Social anxiety. I mean, great stuff. It didn't work so well in the crowded conference hall because it didn't pick up the audio, but it was really neat stuff. Motion tracking and feedback. So being able to, now we can track the hands, but eventually it'll be, you could have it to where there's a camera that's on that person, and so that there's a tracking the person's body movements and bringing feedback into VR. And I think as far as where things are going, probably the next big advancement, these headsets are pretty good. If you put them on, you have a chance to check it out. The visuals are pretty good. In another couple of years, this foveated rendering, they call it. So if I'm looking at Brenda here, that's all I see. I don't see, there's not a lot of focus, so if you look at straight, you see maybe 30 degrees field of view, really high resolution. Everybody else is kind of out of focus. And so that's what these headsets are going to do. They're going to track your pupils, and then they can project an 8K video or an 8K image right where you're looking. Everything else can be lower resolution, and then it's less computer work. So, and then this seamless, I think the way things will go is seamless VR and AR. So you'll take a device like this with 4 cameras on it, and you could be completely in a different space altogether, or they'll turn on the cameras and bring in the real world, and they can mix the two better that way, I think, than what the other augmented reality headsets are doing. I think that's about it.
Outstanding. Thanks, guys. So that kind of wraps it up for us. I would love to open it up for some questions. Yeah, here, I might circulate with a microphone because I got an extra one.
Hi there. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the
population that you're working with specifically with this? Because you're talking about the data that you're going to be showing, like looking at for completion, all that kind of stuff. And I'm really curious about whether that you're going to break that out by the population, the kinds of participants or client population.
Actually, I have a bit of an answer to that. It's something that we've been talking about. I had no idea that so many other people were talking about this, but we had been looking at, so obviously, for this job site specifically, people being able to possess fine and gross motor skills, measured to the ability to move and manipulate balls and boxes, clearly going to be a prerequisite. So we didn't worry about the accessibility from that component. But of course, as we generalize to other job sites, we're going to be looking not so much at, cater to people's specific disabilities, community levels, as we talked about yesterday, but much more functional abilities, where your functional challenges. Can you manipulate objects of this size, this size, this size, this fine, this fine? And so that's definitely something that's a consideration that we're working on right now, because this is a little bit, we haven't even started thinking about generalization yet. It's very specific. So our sample size is very small. So right now we know exactly the population we're looking at, but when we start generalizing, that's a big feature that we're looking to make sure that we track of. So thanks for that. Yes. Wow. Hi everyone. Okay.
I just want to follow on his really
Okay.
quickly. So I had a similar sort of question. I'm wondering if you've encountered what some of the limitations are. So let me just use my son. This is Isaac, my son, as an example. So he doesn't merge between his two eyes. He doesn't have the 3D vision. Is something like that a limitation of virtual reality, or the balance or control, body, physical balance, anything like that?
I think actually working with one of the camera or VR camera vendors, I think he said it was like 5 to 8% of the population cannot see the 3D. So it was actually a very large number, and this is a camera company that makes stereoscopic virtual reality cameras, but I was really surprised to see the number that was that large. So it's not an issue.
But will it affect, like, I think what I heard you saying was, would it, with balance and, there's some individuals that this just wouldn't work physically. Is that?
Yeah, just what those, aspects of a person's
So if you take a
challenges
look at how we find depth, there are 5 ways. There's stereopsis, there's superposition, there's how big things are, there's motion, and there's the brightness. So a lot of these things we can use, and just because you can't see stereoptically, the images will still be seen, and you will still be using all the things you normally use to make interpretations.
Having said that, we run the lounge there in Boulder, and I'd say there's probably maybe 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 people just can't do VR. They put the VR headset on, and they get nauseous and they just rip it off. So there's a pretty good number of people that this just won't work. But there's there's a bigger number of people where it will work.
And to address that specifically, because that is something that comes up a lot. So seizures and nausea. People are really, really concerned about that, and we're very cognizant of that. What we've actually found is, so with experiences like this, there's always a level of, the unknown. Like, I had no idea that I might get triggered into motion sickness by a VR headset, so I tried the VR headset. So there is an element of that, to be sure. But generally speaking, because these experiences are not, someone's coming at you, flying real fast, and it's not really fast paced, we generally have found that even people who report feeling nauseous in a VR experience for prolonged periods of time playing games that move really quickly, have reported no issues around that with this experience. A lot of that is because so much of it is very stationary, and that's something we want to keep considering in the future. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, before you actually teach them this skill, do you pre-teach them using the virtual reality? Like other things that are very simple, so they get a feel of what it's like to move their hands and see their hands in front of them?
Yeah, so Oculus actually has these like little video training clips of like how to use the hands and get used to an environment and stuff, and so like that stuff we utilize. And then with the group that goes to the lounge, we actually started with the Go's, just to put them on and have them get used to it that way, and then they started using more of the Oculus and stuff like that, of like moving around and
those things to help individuals, and it also depends on the individual and the needs that they have, and so just making sure we keep those in check as well. Like, if someone is very anxious about putting the headset on, of like casting it while someone else is using it to get them comfortable with it, and then maybe put it up to their eyes, like the one lady we work with. And so, you know, it is kind of individual based too, of like making sure we're providing that extra support for them.
Given the proprietary nature of technology, and you're talking Oculus and you're developing under Oculus and as such, but there are headsets out there like HTC, Lenovo, and as such, where a company or an organization will buy those kind of technologies and these things won't run under them. Do you think in the future?
This will run, we can make this work on any device.
Just like
So all of the tools that people are using, pretty much everyone develops with Unity or Unreal for any of these devices, and so you can port them around. It's not perfect, it isn't trivial always, but that's the idea. Is that many of these things run on are designed. You know, they're all using similar development environments. By the way, Unity is a development environment that any of you can download and play with and try to make domains like these guys do.
So my understanding is the point that you're at right now is that people from Imagine who are employees have used the virtual reality, and then eventually it'll be your clients who are doing that, but they're not using it yet.
We've had some kind of tested out for our earlier stages that have currently worked there and everything, and to see how it works and, you know, what challenges they had and everything. But they're already employed there. And then the individuals that we picked that kind of struggle with the job site, and we see a lot of errors with them, they're the ones that we haven't tried it out with, just so that we don't support the bad habits or, you know, those errors going forward.
So I guess this is a two-sided question. If you were to go to straight virtual reality prior to working at Left Hand, how do you teach the grading and the amount of strength that it takes to lift the thing and to slide it? And is that eventually something where you might wear a glove and be able to feel that?
So in that aspect, we make sure that we have them go to the job site first and do the training there, and then we see what errors they have, and then we can do like a VR headset. Just because of like those reasons of like walking and picking up the beer, it's much heavier than it is in VR. And so it's good to have that first to try it out with them, and then we can also see like at, you know, box 3 they're having an error, and so then when we do our baseline we have that as well, and then we can focus on those things.
And from a work hardening perspective, then they'd be able to do multiples and have the strength to sustain.
So, yeah, I think the goal with the VR is really just teaching them the sequence of operations. So it's just, you know, they can learn the whole sequence. Then the most effective way is then put them with the real stuff to understand how heavy it is and so forth. You could start getting haptic gloves and blah blah blah. You be throwing a lot of good money after that.
Or you can start using the augmented reality
Right.
Or the smart. I think smart glasses would work, right? So once they've learned it, then you could cue them with the smart glass technology, which would be really inexpensive.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? I think we might be coming up on time. Is that a thing? Ooh, 3 minutes early. I'm impressed by all of you.
I think I saw some more hands that didn't.
Is that true? I really want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask if you need. Okay. So just to give you guys a heads up, we are going to be available after lunch in the Sage Room in the event that you want to try it out for yourself. I know that there's a lot of things that are going on right now that we don't want to keep you from. The signed book opportunity is coming up next, and then there's lunch. So if you are interested at some point throughout the course of the afternoon, like to come by and try it out for yourself, we happily extend that invitation. And thank you so much, guys.
Sage.
Sage.
Yes. Yep. So you try it out.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, you can try it out now if you would like.
Now, later, when it doesn't really matter to me. I want to play with it a little bit. I haven't really played much with the Oculus. I've done a lot of Vive stuff.
Cool. Yeah, the
And
Oculus
I'm
is really
especially interested in sort of the way that you're sort of setting up your teaching. I've been doing a lot of stuff with
Yeah.
accessibility and VR, but not so